Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is one of the most beloved sitcoms of the 90s. Not only did it catapult Will Smith from rapper to global Hollywood superstar, damn! But it introduced a cast of characters we instantly fell in love with, and of course, gave us the Carlton dance. But there is one incident that has cast a shadow on the show's legacy for decades. After the third season, Janet Hubert, who played the strong-willed and outspoken matriarch Aunt Viv,
"You are not going to MacArthur Park tonight. In fact, none of you are going to MacArthur Park tonight."
Wait a minute.
Boy, do not test me.
Yes.
Was fired from the show with little explanation. When season 4 started, there was just a new actress in the role, and other than a brief joke about the switch.
You know, Miss Banks, since you had that baby, there's something different about you.
It was never addressed, and the show just continued on as if nothing happened. In truth, this marked a shift for the series. It just wasn't the same without Janet Hubert's presence. Daphne Maxwell Reid, the actress who replaced her, was likable enough, but she didn't have the gravitas to rein in Will's troublemaking or match wits with James Avery's larger-than-life Uncle Phil.
You're the one who's too easy on them.
Oh, really? Does this sound familiar? Daddy, I need $300.
You know, Janet added a kind of chic style to the show.
For me as a young girl, like I saw her with a spotlight on her. I thought she was radiant.
So why did this happen? Why did they make such a strange and abrupt change at the height of the show's popularity? I mean, if it ain't broke, you don't fix it, and certainly if it's getting massive ratings, you don't change things. Well, to understand it, you have to understand the two people most responsible for what happened, and where each of them came from. The first person responsible was Janet Hubert herself. A seasoned Broadway actress and professional dancer. I mean, she was actually in the original cast of the Broadway musical Cats. Hubert was just as headstrong, proud, and outspoken in life as she was in character.
Did you ask your wife to calm down?
Calm yourself, Barney Fife.
Vivian, please.
She had great reverence for the tradition of her profession.
There was a need for me to have professionalism on the set because I was used to it.
She was also going through a difficult time during the filming of season 3.
In the third season, I was having a really rough time at home. That was not a good marriage.
On top of that, she was going through a very difficult pregnancy, and she didn't take any breaks from working. Actually, they worked the pregnancy into the show. So if Janet Hubert had little patience for anything she felt was unprofessional before, you could imagine that she had zero patience in season 3. Then you have the other responsible party in this incident, which of course was the star, Will Smith.
Who, me?
Will wasn't a trained actor with years of experience paying his dues.
This is the first thing I've ever done acting, so.
He built his name in music during the hip-hop explosion of the late 80s, which is a very different industry that played by very different rules. The truth is, Will was only ever used to being number one in the center of attention professionally.
That ain't necessarily a bad thing,
And his casting on The Fresh Prince was in many ways handed to him by executive producer Quincy Jones. And when you're essentially a kid and all you really know is being a star, chances are that your attitude and behavior is not always going to be by the rules and super respectful. Cast members of The Fresh Prince have remained pretty vague, but essentially it seems that Will Smith wanted to do and say and act however he wanted, and Janet Hubert began to feel disrespected. And not being one to grin and bear things, she likely made her opinion known on more than one occasion.
Janet called me and I said, Janet, you have to look at it the way it's set up. It's Will's show,
What is known is that the atmosphere on the Fresh Prince set became very tense by season 3.
I wasn't privy to all of the ins and outs because I was little, but I do remember the doors going from open to closed. All the dressing room doors. There was tension.
And ultimately, Will Smith decided to flex his muscles as the star.
May the best man win. Me.
As season 3 came to an end and it was time for actors to renegotiate their contracts, Janet Hubert asked for a raise, which is to be expected given that she was a key cast member of a show that had become a major ratings hit. But the network's response to her was insulting.
They offered me this really bad deal.
Allegedly, they offered no raise, they just offered the same pay, but for less episodes.
They offered me 10 weeks of work. They said, and you can't work anywhere else.
And as actors get paid per episode, this essentially means they were offering her less money. The network also put a clock on the offer, meaning if Hubert didn't accept by a certain date, that the offer was no longer good. Initially, on the advice of her agent, Hubert decided to hold out for a better offer. Surely the network wasn't going to mess with a winning formula to appease a bratty star. Ultimately, though, that's exactly what they were willing to do. And sure enough, Janet let the contract deadline lapse, and when she finally did come back to the table to accept what they had offered her,
They said, well, no, it's gone past its sell-by date.
over the years, Janet has been very vocal about the injustice of these events and critical of Will Smith and others.
I'm sorry, I just have to say something.
Janet Hubert was never difficult on that set. Janet Hubert was so professional. I think Will was young, he was inexperienced, and I think he simply had to win.
She basically claims that she was tricked out of a job, and she kind of was.
It's not about being bitter, it's about being right.
But whereas Hubert has taken many opportunities to lash out at Will Smith, Smith, being surrounded by some of the best publicists in the business, remained silent, and by doing this, the backlash basically never really affected him or his career. Ultimately, in November of 2020, a Fresh Prince reunion was aired, and Will Smith at long last sat down with Janet Hubert, heard her out, and the two seemingly made amends.
I can see now the level of pain that it was for you just to show up every day.
And I'm sorry that I have blasted you to pieces. Come here, you.
Are you able to fully accept his apology?
Absolutely. And when I did hug him, I hugged him and he hugged me back for real, because we both needed it so desperately from each other.
Perhaps their bridge truly has been mended. She even came to Smith's defense a couple years later after the Chris Rock Oscar slap heard round the world. Or, maybe more likely, she's finally come to terms with the fact that life isn't always fair, especially in Hollywood, and she's finally decided to grin and bear it.